In this battle report, the Tomb Kings will take on Bretonnia. This is Game 1 of our first regular season schedule. Our club has 6 players, each with their own army. Each game will be 1,000 points, and it will culminate in a double elimination tournament. But let's kick off this first game. The Tomb Kings are led by a herald. He has 2 hand weapons and a 35-point magical item that will be revealed later. There's a Lich Priest, level 2, Lore of Nehekara. 10 horsemen, full command, spears, light armor, shields. 2 units of 20 warriors, full command, light armor, shields. 1 with spears, 1 with hand weapons. 3 chariots with full command. And lastly, a hero titan in the back. The full army, 1,005 points. Here's how they add up. Here is Bretonnia. They have a command group of 3 Grail Knights. There's a Paladin General, and he has an obsidian amulet. There's a Paladin Battle Standard Bearer, and also a musician. There's 10 bowmen with only longbows and no command. 20 men-at-arms with halberds and light armor and full command. 12 Knights of the Realm with full command. And 6 questing knights with full command. The grand total and the breakdown. The Field of Screams, 4x8 table, set up by our club's random landscape generator. 2 mysterious woods and 1 mysterious river. All other pieces are normal, including another forest, trees, walls, fences, a cave, a tent, and a pile of bones. Here's the Tomb Kings deployment. The horsemen on the right flank, the warriors and the characters in the center, and the chariots on the left center. And Bretonnia's deployment. The Knights of the Realm are on Bretonnia's right flank, the questing knights in the center, the paladins in between them. The bowmen are on the left flank near the tent, and then the men-at-arms are in the left center. The Tomb Kings are allowed to do a vanguard move with their horsemen, and there's no other pre-game movements. It's time to get started. The Tomb Kings will start this battle. There's no charges to declare. They will have to navigate a slight bottleneck on the left center. The chariots pushed through first, and then the hero titans stepped aside a bit, and all the warriors and the characters moved forward. All of these units have the undead rule, and so none of them can march. And the skeleton horseman continued down the right flank, in its vanguard position. Magic phase. In the Bonepile Miniatures system, all wizards know their signature spell of their lore, plus extra spells according to their wizard level. So this Lich Priest knows signature spell as well as spells 1 and 2. The Winds of Magic generate a power pool of 3 and a dispel pool of 2. The priest attempts the signature spell, Incantation of the Desert Wind, cast on an 8+, and it is an augment spell, and the wizard is able to channel for it. It goes off and the Bretonnians cannot dispel it. Units that are within 12 inches of the wizard will get to move again. And that will be their magic phase. and that will also be the end of their turn. So we'll move on to Bretonnia. Bretonnia stays the advance. They use this turn to pray to the Lady of the Lake. If they maintain their honor and courage in battle, she will grant them protection from their enemies. And that ends their turn. Tomb Kings turn 2. No charges declared. Each unit moves forward. The bottleneck is passed. Magic phase. Winds of Magic. 5 power dice and 2 dispel dice. The signature spell is attempted again. It goes off and there's no dispel. Units around the wizard go forward again. No more spell attempts. This is the end of their turn. Back to Bretonnia. No charges to declare. The knights move but do not march into the center right open field ahead of them. They will have a worse bottleneck to navigate, and I will come back to that in a minute. But the men-at-arms march towards that wall, and then the bowmen do not move. So that mysterious river does create a bottleneck on this end of the field. One of the Bonepile Miniatures Club rules is, if mysterious terrain is found in the deployment zone of an army, then they are allowed to discover what the mystery is for that mysterious terrain piece after deployment but before the game starts. Bretonnia did that for this river, and our club has a big list of 4d6 rivers, and that list can be found on our blog. But Bretonnia rolled up a Fountain of Youth for this river, and that magic river allows only the first unit that enters into it to roll a d6 regeneration roll for that unit, and it can restore that many wounds up to its original unit size. So now that Bretonnia knows of that special ability and that it only works on the first unit, they are going to have to be very picky and choosy about when they cross or step into that river. That's why this bottleneck situation on their end of the field is more than just meets the eye. Should they take full advantage of that special ability, or should they just ignore it? Let's watch and see what happens. But there's nothing else for Bretonnia to do on this turn, so we will go back to the Tomb Kings. Tomb Kings movement phase. There's a big open field in front of them. Full speed ahead for a skeleton. And for those wondering, we do give chariot pullers a -1 movement penalty. That's why they are 7 and not 8. And we also give a movement penalty for barded war horses. So that explains the knights you see with Bretonnia. Magic phase. The Winds of Magic generate 5 dice for the power pool and 2 for the dispel pool. The Lich Priest warms up for another incantation of the Desert Wind. And once again it manages to go off, and then the Bretonnians cannot dispel it. And the center mob of units and characters will move forward once again. No more spell attempts after that, and that will be it for their magic phase and the end of their turn. Bretonnia is ready to make their moves. No charges to declare, and it looks like the questing knights are going to stay center. The Knights of the Realm are staying on the right flank, and the paladins will be following right behind them. And then the men-at-arms finally reach the wall, and they are ready in defense position. And then over in the corner, the bowmen are still parked in front of the tent. Tomb Kings movement phase. The horsemen wheel around the fence. All others continue into the open field. Magic phase. The Winds of Magic generate 9 dice for the power pool and 4 dice for the dispel pool. Once again, the Lich Priest casts the signature spell. It goes off, and the Bretonnians cannot dispel it. The skeletons continue to be pushed by the wind. That is the end for the Tomb Kings, and we'll go back to Bretonnia. No charges from Bretonnia. For the remaining moves, the knights on the right flank push forward hard, and then the questing knights in the center only inch forward. The men-at-arms continue to defend the wall, and then the bowmen in the corner inch forward away from the tent. Bretonnia will try to shoot. The bowmen will target the skeleton horsemen, but this will be a tough shot. The bowmen are ballistic skill 3, and they will have 2 shooting penalties, one for long range and another for move and shoot. They get off 10 shots at the horsemen, but they all fail to hit their target. And that will end this round for Bretonnia. Tomb King's movement phase. And now the Tomb Herald unveils the magic item that he possesses. The Cloak of Dunes, from the treasures of the necropolis. This gives him the fly special ability and some special shooting attacks. He immediately takes to the air. So the Bonepile Miniatures Club has our own set of flying rules. There would be too much to cover quickly at this moment. I'll have to refer you to either a YouTube video found on this channel or our hobby blog at bonepileminiatures.com if you want to learn more about our flying rules set. Look for it under our rules supplements. Otherwise, we'll try to explain as we go how our set of flying rules are different. But for the time being, the Tomb Herald takes off into the air, and he does not have to land until he decides to do so. He can remain in the air for multiple turns, and while he is in the air, he cannot be attacked by ground forces directly in close combat, unless he swoops down to try to attack them. Then they can attack back. And then, after taking off into the air, the Tomb Herald inches a little bit forward. Besides the Tomb Herald, all other units inch forward, except for the skeletal horsemen. They were just barely within the range of those peasant bowmen, so they decided to sidestep a little bit to get themselves back out of range and out of reach of those arrows. So even though the bowmen all missed their shots, they were successful in shutting down the vanguard advance of those horsemen down that flank. And now the magic phase. The Winds of Magic end up 5 against 2 dice. Once again, they attempt the incantation of the Desert Wind, and it goes off and they successfully are able to move again. No dispel attempt from Bretonnia. The infantry are starting to pull ahead of the chariots and the horsemen. The Tomb Kings are already halfway down the battlefield, propelled by their magic winds. But the Tomb Kings will attempt another spell. This will be Shem's Burning Gaze of the Lore of Light. This is a bound spell from the Hero Titan. A magic missile cast on a 3+. The spell does go off. The Bretonnians attempt to dispel it, and they successfully dispel it. That was their first dispel of the game. No more magic. That will end their turn. Back to Bretonnia. Fate is on the doorstep. No charges to declare. Remaining moves. The Knights of the Realm. They are ahead of the assault and decide to stay still. Questing Knights. They make a big move up the center near the river. The Paladins make a bold move, changing from the right flank behind the Knights of the Realm and moving all the way over to the center behind the questing knights. The men-at-arms realize that they are not going to be in the fight and decide to abandon the wall. They reform, facing the center. They're going to need to try to come about that wall. And then over in the corner, the bowmen decide to inch forward again to get those horsemen back into range. And in doing so, they do step into the river and activate the special ability of regeneration from the Fountain of Youth, effectively ignoring the special ability of that mysterious river. Henceforth, it will basically be treated like a normal river. That's the end of their moves, and now we'll go on to the shooting phase. The skeletal horsemen are back into range of the peasant bowmen. Once again, they will have all the penalties as they had before, with long range and the move and shoot penalty. They launch 10 arrows at their target. All miss but one. They get one hit through. And then that one hit does make a wound. The skeletal horsemen get to try their armor save. It is a 4+ armor save, and they roll and successfully save the wound. No final wounds on the horsemen. And that will end their shooting phase. Back to the Tomb Kings. The Tomb Kings do not declare any charges. For their remaining moves, all of their units inch forward just a little bit more. But it looks like the horsemen and the warriors with hand weapons are committing to the center, and then the warriors with spears are committing to the left flank with the chariots. And then the hero titan may also be committing to the center. Next to the magic phase. And once again, the winds of magic generate 5 power dice and 2 dispel dice. And their first spell will be the incantation of the desert wind once again. That spell goes off, and the Bretonnians do not attempt to dispel. However, the Tomb Kings only moved 1 unit, and that was the Tomb Herald, who flew over the unit of questing knights. And as he was flying over, he launched his special shooting attacks upon the unit below. And we will resolve those during the shooting phase. So now let's move on to the next spell from the Tomb Kings. Spell number 2, Neru's Incantation of Protection. This is an augment spell that grants the target unit a 5+ ward save until the next magic phase. And the target unit is the warriors with hand weapons that is right in front of the questing knights. It is cast on a 9+. The Tomb Kings roll and it does go off. The Bretonnians tried to dispel this one and they failed to dispel it. So it does go in effect on the warrior unit. They will have the 5+ ward save. And the Tomb Kings do have 1 die left in their power pool. And so the Hero Titan will try one more time Shem's Burning Gaze. This is the magic missile spell. And he rolls and misses. It does not go off. So that's an end to the power pool for the Tomb Kings, and that will finish off their magic phase. Now on to the shooting phase. So here we will resolve the special shooting attacks from the Tomb Herald onto the questing knights as he flew over them. He rolls a 2d6 for the number of hits from his shooting attacks. They're like a bunch of little darts or shards or something. And he rolls an 8, so there's 8 hits. But then the strength of the attack is a strength 2 against the knight's toughness 3. And of those 8 hits, only 3 cause wounds. And then the knights get to roll their mighty 2+ armor save. And they are able to save all of those wounds. So nothing gets through. So that will end the Tomb King's shooting phase, and then there is no combat phase yet. So we'll go back to Bretonnia for their turn. And right off the bat, Bretonnia declares a charge on the chariots from the Knights of the Realm. The charge distances in our club are a little bit shorter than you're used to. For us, we use a 2d6 roll, and then we add the highest die rolled to the normal M value. But this unit has the Swift Stride rule, so they will actually roll a 3rd die. And then the chariots will hold. So the Bretonians roll for their charge, and the results is they actually bomb the roll, completely bomb it. And when we fail a charge, we use the highest die rolled only as the charge distance. And their highest die score was a 4, so they only move 4 inches forward. That is not going to be good for them. So with that big disappointment, we'll move on to the remaining moves. So the questing knights and the paladins both fan out across the river. I think the questing knights would have charged those warriors if the hero titan wasn't such a danger on their right flank. And then the paladins' move will prevent the skeletal horsemen from flanking the questing knights on their left flank. So this shows us why the paladins moved all the way over from the right flank to the center. Otherwise, the questing knights could have been triple teamed from 3 sides. The men-at-arms are trying to bring their support to the fight, but they will be late. And then the bowmen remain in place, hoping to get a more accurate shot this turn. And from there, we'll continue to the shooting phase. The peasant bowmen target the horsemen again. They are still long range, but that is their only penalty this time. They get off their 10 shots. This time they get 5 hits. Then they roll for wounds, and that ends up with 3. 3 wounds so far. And next the horsemen get to roll for their armor save, and they save 1. So 2 final wounds on those horsemen. The peasant bowmen draw first blood, or first bone dust, I guess you could say. So that will end their shooting phase and Bretonia's turn. Now we'll go back to the Tomb Kings. The warriors with hand weapons declare charge on the questing knights. The knights hold, and the skeletons easily make it into the charge. And then the knights also pass their fear check. But that's all the charges in the center field. Now on the Tomb King's left flank, the chariots declare a charge on the Knights of the Realm. The knights hold. The chariots also have swift stride, and they roll and they successfully complete the charge. And since they made the charge, they also get to make impact hits on the knights during the combat phase. And then the Knights of the Realm also pass their fear check. But the Tomb Kings have one more charge to declare, and this will be the warriors with spears, declaring a charge on the flank of the Knights of the Realm. This will be a long charge for that infantry, and then they will also have to charge through that mysterious woods on the flank of the knights. But they try anyways. They roll, and they successfully complete the charge. And that will put the knights' formation in a disrupted state. And then the Tomb Kings roll on the list of mysterious woods that we have. The Bonepile Miniatures has another 4d6 list of mysterious woods that you can find on our blog, bonepileminiatures.com. And I will reveal what the results were for this roll when we get to the combat phase. But that is the last charge that the Tomb Kings declared this turn. So now on to remaining moves. So the Tomb Herald flies towards the men-at-arms with the halberds. He's probably looking for a softer target than those knights. And then the Hero Titan and the Lich Priest inch forward just a little bit. And then the skeletal horsemen do not move, they stay right where they are. So much for their vanguard position. But that's the end of the movement phase. On to the magic phase. The winds of magic generate 9 power dice and 3 dispel dice. First they will attempt spell number 2, the incantation of protection, but they will try the boosted version. The extra power will grant the 5+ ward save to all units within 12 inches of the wizard, and the boosted version will need a roll of an 18+. So they go for it, and they succeed. The spell will be effective on the warriors with hand weapons, the warriors with spears, the Hero Titan, and the skeletal horsemen. And that success will activate the lore attribute. The skeletal horsemen can immediately roll for regeneration. and they recover 2 wounds from regeneration, restoring their original unit size. There's some very upset peasant bowmen right now, but the hero titan will attempt Shem's burning gaze one more time. This time it does go off. The Bretonians cannot dispel it, and the target unit is the men-at-arms. This magic missile causes D6 strength 4 hits, and they roll 3 hits. And then those 3 hits cause 2 wounds. The men-at-arms wear light armor and have a 6+ armor save. They roll and fail to save any wounds. And these peasants do not have a ward save. So there are 2 final wounds on the men-at-arms. No more spell attempts from the Tomb Kings. We'll move on to the combat phase, the first combat phase of the game. And we'll start with the warriors and the questing knights. In this round, all combatants will have initiative 3, since the skeletons charged and the knights have great weapons, so they'll strike simultaneously. The skeletons strike with 11 attacks, but with a weapon skill of only 2, they only make 3 hits, and then 2 of those hits cause wounds. And then next the knights roll for their 2+ armor save, and they save both wounds. No final wounds on the knights. But now they get to strike back. They have 7 attacks, and 6 of those go through as hits, and then 4 of those cause wounds. The warriors have a 5+ armor save with their shield and their light armor, but they roll for 0 armor saves. And then finally they do have a 5+ ward save thanks to the incantation of protection from their Lich Priest. They roll and score 1 ward save, leaving them with 3 final wounds. And then last but not least, all the war horses strike and they all make hits. But then with all those hits they score 0 wounds. So we'll go on to combat resolution. The combat between the warriors and the knights ends up in a tie with 4 points each. The warriors charge, they have a banner, and they have 2 extra ranks. And then the knights have 3 wounds and a banner. So they will stay locked in combat for the next round. Moving to the next combat. On to the chariot battle. The chariots will first get to resolve their impact hits on the knights. They each get D6 impact hits. They roll and score 11 impact hits. And then they roll for wounds and score 8 wounds. But then these knights also have a 2+ armor save and roll for their armor saves. And they score 5 of them. So that knocks them down to 3 wounds. And then they have a ward save to try, but they failed to make any ward saves. So there will be 3 final wounds on the knights from those impact hits. The remaining attacks will be resolved by initiative order. However, the initiative is tied for this combat round, 3 all across the board. They will strike simultaneously, but since they charge, we'll start the honors with the charioteers. The charioteers roll for hits, and they miss all of their attacks. Next will be the 6 skeletal steeds, and the steeds only manage 1 hit out of the 6. But that 1 hit does go through as a wound. But then the knights manage to score an armor save to prevent the wound. So no wounds from those chariots except for those impact hits. Time for the knights to strike back. And they target their 13 attacks on the chariots. But they end up only scoring 3 hits. Another bombed roll. And then only 1 of those 3 hits makes it through as a wound. And then the chariots will have a 4+ armor save. So they roll and they score the save. So no final wounds on those chariots from the knights. But of course, the war horses get to strike next. They rear up for their 6 attacks, and the horses end up landing 4 hits on the chariots. And then they roll for wounds and wind up with 2 wounds. And then the chariots roll for their armor save and end up saving 1. So there is 1 wound that goes through on the chariots from the horses. And now to the flank for the spearmen attack. They fight in 1 extra rank and will have 16 total attacks. But they also struggle and manage to only make 3 hits on the knights, and then 2 go through as wounds. The knights use their armor save and prevent one of those, but no such luck with their ward save. So finally 1 wound goes through on the knights from the skeletons. But before we wrap up this combat, we must resolve the results of that mysterious forest terrain roll. And for that, the Tomb Kings rolled a living woods. So nothing prevented them from making their charge, but they will have to deal with a bunch of angry trees. So the spearmen will have to endure D3 Strength 6 hits from the trees during each combat phase that they're in the woods. But any wounds will not count towards any team's combat resolution. So the trees roll and ultimately end up scoring 1 final wound on those spearmen. So now we'll go to combat resolution. And the knights were basically routed by the skeletons. However, the fight was quite lackluster overall. The only bright spot were those impact hits from the chariots. But the overall strategy of the Tomb Kings did pay off, and they win the combat. The knights will have to take a break test. But before we get to that, I must explain another club rule that we have connected with combat. And they are leadership, bonuses, and penalties connected with winning or losing the combat. And those leadership modifiers persist with the unit throughout the game. And they can accumulate up to plus or minus 3 from their original leadership value. And still observing that double 1s are always a pass and double 6s are always a fail when it comes to leadership tests. And this leadership system represents the waning and waxing of courage in a unit throughout the battle. So in this case, the knights will take a penalty and the chariots and the spearmen will take a bonus. And that will come into play during the knights' break test. Their leadership is reduced from 8 to 7. And so the knights try their break test and end up failing. They will flee from the chariots. And what do you know, they also bomb their flee move and only make it a total of 6 inches. The chariots pursue and they make a total of 10 inches on their pursuit. They catch up to the knights and slay them all. That was a lackluster but very consequential battle. The knights disappointed the Lady of the Lake, and they were not spared. The Bretonnians' right flank is now completely gone. The Tomb Kings will rack a bunch of points for that one, and surely those chariots will be looking for some more action. But for now, we'll go back to the Bretonnians' turn. Let's see what they can do. The Bretonnians open with a charge. The Grail Knights upon the skeleton horsemen. The horsemen decide to hold, and their charge roll is a success. They pass their fear check and they are in battle. No more charges, remaining moves. The men-at-arms march hastily up the center. Since the Tomb Herald is up in the air, they don't need a leadership test. They might be tracking towards that hero titan. And then the peasant bowmen pivot towards the hero titan, but no intentions on getting any closer to him. No more moves, shooting phase next. The peasant bowmen aim towards the hero titan. Another tough shot since they moved, and he is also long range for them. They fire all 10 shots at him and they all miss. Not a single hit. That was a Hail Lady shot. A little too much for them. That's it for the shooting phase, now on to the combat phase. These are the only 2 combats occurring on the battlefield right now. But we'll start with the questing knights and the skeleton warriors. The knights and their horses have initiative 3 and will strike first this turn. The knights swing their 7 attacks and they get 3 hit on the skellies. But then all 3 hits carry through as wounds with those great weapons. And the skeletons do not score any saves, either ward saves or armor saves. So the knights inflict 3 final wounds on the skellies. But before the skellies can strike back, the horses also put 1 more skeleton back in the dust for an additional wound. And then the skeletons can strike back. They also bomb their roll and only manage 1 hit. But that 1 hit does go through as a wound, And then the knights cannot save it with either their armor save or ward save. So one knight goes down. Combat resolution. And with all those wounds, the knights tally up to 5 points. And then the warriors tally only to 3. So the skeletons will lose combat, take a leadership penalty, and will have to take a break test. But the skeletons are unbreakable and have the unstable rule. Instead of running, more models will crumble into the dust. Having lost combat by 2, they will crumble by 2 more warriors. But that's where we make a mistake. Even though we wrote it down, we neglected to remove those 2 extra models. We may live or die by that mistake. So there's 13 skeletons to go. Next combat. It's the paladins and the skeleton horsemen. The knights are outnumbered 3 to 1, but the knights will strike first. They will combine for 8 attacks. But sadly, they also bomb their to-hit roll. They only get 2 hits out of the 8. And then of those 2 hits, one of them goes through as a wound. And the horsemen try to save it, and they cannot. So one final wound on those horsemen from those paladins. Another lackluster performance. It seems like with both teams, the dice alternate between hot and cold. The next to strike are the war horses. They get 3 attacks, and they manage to land 1 hit. And then that 1 hit does go through as a wound. The horsemen try to save the wound, and they fail. So there's 1 more wound upon the horsemen from those horses. 2 wounds so far. And then next the horsemen get to strike back. They end up landing 2 hits, and then those 2 hits go through as wounds, and then the knights strangely fail their 2+ armor save on both wounds. But then they luckily are able to save both wounds with their ward save. Just like I said, the luck keeps going back and forth, hot and cold. And then last but not least, the skeletal steeds get to strike, but they miss all their attacks. On to combat resolution. And the Grail Knight Paladins come off victorious this round, with 4 points against 1 for the Horsemen. The Horsemen will lose a leadership point, and the Knights will gain 1. And by the unstable rule, the Horsemen will crumble by 3 more wounds. They've already lost half their unit. So that will end Bretonnia's combat phase and their turn. Back to the Tomb Kings. The Tomb Kings have 1 charge to declare. The chariots upon the men-at-arms. This will be a long charge, since the chariots will have to complete a wheel maneuver to get there. But this will likely be their best chance to get at those men-at-arms before they charge into that hero titan. So they attempt the charge with their swift stride bonus. And they make it in. They complete the charge. Great news for the Tomb Kings and terrible news for those men-at-arms. However, the unit does pass their fear check, but more chariot impact hits are coming. The Crazy Train. On to remaining moves. With the men-at-arms occupied by those chariots, the herald picks a new target and flies towards the peasant bowmen. This could be rough for them since they have no armor. And then off-screen, the hero titan moves forward just a couple inches. Magic phase. This time only 4 power dice and 2 dispel dice. The Lich Priest attempts spell number 2 on the warriors with hand weapons. The Incantation of Protection. That spell goes off and the Bretonnians do not dispel it. But this was not the boosted version, so only the skeleton warriors with hand weapons will have the 5+ ward save. The Restless Dead attribute is also activated upon this unit. They roll for regeneration and recover 3 wounds. So back to 16 models. Next spell, Shem's Burning Gaze from the Hero Titan, his bound spell. Targeting the peasant bowman. The spell does go off, But the Bretonnians try to dispel it and are successful. It is dispelled. That's the second time they've dispelled that spell this game. And that ends the magic phase. There's no shooting phase, so we'll move on to the combat phase. The Grail Knights and the Skeletal Horsemen. The Knights will strike first again, and they only manage to get one more final wound on the Skeletal Horsemen this turn. Even the War Horses have no success, and in return the Skeletal Horsemen fail to put any wounds on the Knights. So this time the Knights win combat resolution 2-1, and that will make the Skeletal Horsemen crumble by one more wound. They are now down to 3 horsemen. Next combat, the Skeletal Warriors against the Questing Knights. The Questing Knights will also strike first. They too only manage to inflict one wound upon the warriors, but their war horses do manage to get one more wound on those skeletons, making a total of 2 wounds. And then striking back, the skeletons manage to get 3 initial wounds on the knights, but with their mighty 2+ armor save, they are able to save them all. So this time the knights win combat 3-2. The skeletons will crumble by one more wound. However, we made another mistake and removed 2 models instead of 1. But since we failed to remove 2 models on the last turn, we are almost back to where we should be. Now there's only 1 skeleton that should not be there. Next combat will be the chariots who charged into the men-at-arms. And before anyone can strike, we will have to resolve the impact hits from the chariot charge. The chariots roll and they get another whopping 11 impact hits. That's the same as they got on the knights. And ultimately, those impact hits put 5 final wounds upon those men-at-arms, like an entire rank got crushed under the wheels. And then the charioteers managed to get 2 more final wounds upon those helpless men-at-arms, making a total of 7 wounds upon the unit. And then in response, the men-at-arms are unable to do anything effective against those chariots. So no wounds going the other way. This was a one-sided bloodbath. The men-at-arms lose the combat and must take a break test. And as you would expect, they fail and they have to flee. But their flight is pathetic and they cannot get away far enough from those chariots. They are pursued and completely crushed by the crazy train. Now that they have cleared the Bretonnian backfield, the crazy train continues to thunder across the plain. That will be the last combat of this turn, but yet before we forget, there's one more thing we have to do. The skeletal spearmen sitting back in the living woods. They made a reform move during the movement phase, intending to go into the Bretonnian backfield, the same direction that the chariots went. But being stuck in the forest one more turn, they were attacked again by the living trees. 2 more skeletons are crushed into the earth. And then that will finally finish the Tomb King's turn, and we'll go back to Bretonnia. With only 3 units remaining, the Bretonnians have no charges to declare. They also don't make any remaining moves. The peasant bowman cannot charge into that flying tomb herald because he is up in the air. But what they can do is shoot at him. So we'll skip right to the shooting phase. In this situation, there's a positive and a negative shooting modifier that cancel each other out. There's a positive short range modifier that applies to targets within 4 inches. The negative one is part of our flying rule set. Any target that marched in the air, or what we call soared, carries a -1 to hit modifier. So these peasants are just going to use their natural ballistic skill. They desperately shoot their 10 shots towards that herald. They manage 5 hits, and 2 of those go through as wounds. The herald wears light armor and has a 6+ armor save, but he scores no armor saves. So there's 2 final wounds on that herald, and that's all the wounds that he has. So in a fit of desperation and surprise, the peasant bowmen take out the tomb herald, who is also the army general. A big huzzah for them. That ends the shooting phase, and now on to combat. The Paladins versus the Horsemen. In this round, no wounds are inflicted on either unit, so this results in a tie combat this round, and we will go on to extra innings with this grind. The Questing Knights and Skeleton Warriors with hand weapons. And with their great weapons, the Questing Knights score 2 more final wounds on the Skeleton Warriors. And then their war horses add 1 more to the count, for a total of 3. And then in return the skeletons do manage to slip 1 wound through that heavy armor. That's the second noble knight to fall. So the knights will win this round 4-2, and that will cause the skeletons to crumble by 2 more wounds. That will drop the unit to 7 skeletons, but we're also down to only 4 questing knights. We'll see who can last the longest. So that ends the combat phase, and Bretonnia's turn. We'll go back to the Tomb Kings. The Tomb Kings have 1 charge to declare. The chariots will attempt another long charge, wheeling into the back of the questing knights. And the chariots prove to be unstoppable, and they make the charge all the way in. The brave knights will now be in a major pinch between 2 units, and more chariot impact hits are coming upon the knights. The knights do pass their fear check, but also the chariots must take a dangerous terrain check for crossing the river during the charge, which was the Fountain of Youth. And nature seems to be against the undead, as one of the chariots goes under. For remaining moves, the Hero Titan steps aside a little bit, and we'll show you why in a minute. And then the spearmen, over in the Living Woods, they try escaping those angry trees, but they do not make it out of there this turn. Magic phase. The Winds of Magic generate 4 power dice and 2 dispel dice. The Lich Priest will try something new this turn. Spell number 1 on the chariots. The Incantation of Cursed Blades. It is an augment spell that casts on a 7+, and it grants the target unit the killing blow. So they roll the dice to cast the spell, and it goes off. The spell is cast. Bretonnia tries to dispel it, but they cannot. The killing blow is granted. The Restless Dead lore attribute also regenerates a chariot from the deep water. The Tomb Kings have 1 more spell to cast. This will be Shem's Burning Gaze. The reason why the Hero Titan stepped aside a bit during the movement phase was so that he could get the peasant bowmen into view from behind those chariots. The Hero Titan successfully cast the spell, and the Bretonnians do not have anything to dispel it with, so this time it will go off. The magic missile goes sailing towards those peasant bowmen, and without any armor or ward saves, the peasant bowmen take 4 wounds in the blast, and that number of casualties will force a panic test on the bowmen. And without any knights anywhere near, they will face this one alone. With only a leadership of 5, they do not generate enough courage to stick around, and they decide to run. Straight down the stream channel. Vengeance for the Tomb Herald. Combat phase. Back to the Paladins and the Skeletal Horsemen. And with a shout for the lady, the Paladins gather some extra courage for this round. They dispatch the remainder of those skeletal horsemen, leaving nothing behind to fight back. They also emerge completely unwounded from the skirmish, as well as 3 bonus leadership points. And the Grail Knights take advantage of a free reform, and I think it's apparent where they're going next. But now over to the Questing Knights battle. The chariots first get to roll for impact hits. I don't think we allowed the regenerated chariot to do any impact hits, but either way they still rolled a whopping 10 impact hits. But this time those hits only translate to 2 final wounds on those questing knights. But even just those 2 take down half of those remaining knights. Everyone else will strike simultaneously except for the skeleton warriors. So we'll do the honors first to the charioteers. And the charioteers manage to get 1 wound on the knights, but they are able to save it with their 2+ armor save. And then the steeds cannot do anything. They generate no wounds. So now we'll move on to the knights. And the questing knights have a complete turnaround, just like the paladins next to them. All 3 remaining knight attacks and both warhorse attacks all cause final wounds on those skeletons, removing 5 warriors from the unit. And then after doing some counting, the extra skeleton that wasn't supposed to be there was discovered, and he was also removed, ultimately removing 6 of the 7 skeletons. They are just down to their champion. And then that champion tries to strike back but cannot wound those knights. So let's tally up the combat. So this one turns out to be a draw, 6 points each. The questing knights withstand the chariot charge. It was a painful crunch, but the crazy train has come to a halt. But the questing knights' battle is far from over. And then over in the living woods, the skeletal spearmen are attacked by the angry trees. But this time no wounds are drawn, and that will end the Tomb King's turn. The Paladin Grail Knights declare a charge on the Lich Priest. He may have cast his last spell. It is a longer charge, but they roll and make it in. But the charge reaction from the Lich Priest was to flee. So the charge turns into a pursuit, and the Lich Priest is able to flee 1 inch farther than the knights are able to pursue. But there was a little bit of controversy about this move. The Lich Priest has the undead rule, and therefore unbreakable. So there was a little bit of a question whether he should be able to flee from a charge with the unbreakable rule. But we decided that that was applicable more to combat break tests than it was to charge reactions. But let me know in the comments if you think we got that wrong. And then the peasant bowmen were unable to rally and almost moved off the board, but they're still here for now. So with that, we'll skip all the way over to the combat phase. The questing knights want to finish the job on the skeleton warriors. They get to strike first, and they do lay 1 final blow on that champion skeleton. He is gone, and that unit is gone. But the chariots get to strike next from behind, and they are able to cut down 1 more knight with a final wound. And now those knights are down to their final man. And now that they have lost their banner, the Bretonnians will lose the combat. 4 points to 1. The knights lose a leadership, and they have to take a break test. And fortunately for them, they do pass. They also try to make a combat reform, and they succeed. So they are able to turn around and face those chariots. But we'll see what 1 last man will be able to do. That will end the Bretonnians' turn, and we'll go back to the Tomb Kings. The Tomb Kings have no charges to declare. The Lich Priest is unable to rally and continues to flee off the board. The Hero Titan pivots around to face the Paladins. And then the Spearmen in the Living Woods also pivot around to face the Paladin. But they are partially still within the Living Woods, and will get attacked again by the trees. And that will be it for movement. On to the magic phase. But since the Lich Priest is fleeing, we did not bother to roll for the winds of magic. In our rule set, a bound spell can receive 1 free die not from the power pool, and so the Hero Titan was planning on just using those to cast his bound spells. So he first attempts Shem's Burning Gaze upon the Paladins. He successfully casts the spell upon them, and it generates 2 wounds, but the Paladins are able to save both of them with their armor saves. And then he tries his other bound spell, which is Spirit Leech. It's a power level 4, and it is a direct damage spell. And this spell is basically an unmodified leadership plus D6 battle. And so they both roll their die, and the Hero Titan ends up prevailing by 1 point. So the army general will take a wound from the Spirit Leech. No armor saves are allowed, and then the ward save does not come through. The general has 2 wounds remaining, so that ends the magic phase and we'll move on to combat. And it's the chariots against the lonely questing knight. But in this round, neither unit inflicts any wounds on each other. They are locked in dramatic battle, but because of the banner deficit, the Bretonnians lose the fight by 1 point. The knight will lose a leadership and then will have to take the break test, but he passes. So the fight will go on for another round. And the spearmen over in the living woods are attacked by the angry trees again, but no wounds are taken. So that will end the combat phase and we'll go back to the Bretonnians' turn. The paladins continue to pursue the Lich Priest. They declare a charge, but the distance is so short they don't even need to roll a die. They easily make it in, and the decrepit stands no chance of survival. The heroes put him under. No more wizard, and the army hierophant is dead, which means all other undead units will have to take crumble tests for the remainder of the game. The price of being undead. So next, the peasant bowmen have a change of heart and decide to rally and get back into the fight. We almost lost them, but they're way over in the corner of the battlefield again, right back where they started. Combat phase. Back to the questing knight and the chariots. And in this round, the knight puts 1 wound on the chariots, and they fail to do anything back to him, resulting in a tie combat. There will be no break tests, and this fight will continue for another round. This knight will not relent, and this will finish up the Bretonnians' turn, and we'll go back to the Tomb Kings. We open with a charge from the Hero Titan into the back of the questing knight. He's seen enough of these pesky knights, and the Hero Titan causes terror, forcing the knight to take a leadership test. And the test results in a fail. The knight fails the leadership test for terror, even with his +1 leadership bonus. So he's going to run away from the Hero Titan through the unit of the chariots, which means he also must take a dangerous terrain check as he runs through them. He just does not have the heart to face these chariots and the Hero Titan by himself. So he does pass the dangerous terrain check and makes it a distance beyond the chariots. And then the Hero Titan decides to pursue him, and he rolls very well and is able to catch up to the knight and slays him. And thus ends the ride of the questing knights. They are finished. No more charges, remaining moves. The spearmen move forward out of the living woods, heading towards the paladin group. Yet they are still not out of the woods, and are attacked again by the angry trees. And once again the skeletons get out unscathed, no wounds from the trees. And that's the end of the movement phase. Next is the magic phase. And in this round, all of the undead across the army must take instability tests. And this time they all do fine except for 1 spearman who crumbles into the ground. So that unit of warriors is down to 16 skellies. And that will end the Tomb King's turn, and we'll go back to the Bretonnians. And in this round the Bretonnia has no charges to declare, but the Grail Knights decide to reform, turning themselves around and facing the skeleton spearmen. That will end the movement phase, and now the shooting phase. And the peasant bowmen are going to try another long-range shot towards the Hero Titan, another Hail Lady. This time they only get off 6 shots, but they are able to get 2 hits out of the 6. And then of those 2 hits, 1 goes through as a wound, and the Hero Titan cannot save it. So their rally was not in vain. They get 1 more wound off on that Hero Titan, that big bully. He starts the game with 5 wounds, and so now he's down to 4. So that ends the shooting phase, and there is no combat phase, so that ends the Bretonnians' turn. We'll go back to the Tomb Kings. and this will be the final round of the game. No charges to declare, just remaining moves. After getting shot by those peasant bowmen, the hero titan starts heading their way. He's got some unfinished business to take care of. And then the chariots move themselves away from the bowmen so they don't get shot by their pesky little arrows either. And then the warrior spearmen sidestep away from the living woods and those angry trees. And I believe they were also trying to block the paladins from charging a more valuable target behind them. And I think those were the chariots. So that ends the movement phase. Now on to the magic phase. And to open the magic phase, all the undead once again must take an instability test. And this time they all do fine except for the spearman unit. They lose 3 more warriors. And that brings them down to 13. They are quickly losing skeletons. And then the hero titan tries to get off one last spell, Shem's Burning Gaze at the peasant bowman. He rolls his free bound spell die and is able to cast it successfully. The magic missile sails towards the peasant bowman and ultimately causes 3 more wounds on them. The remaining 3 peasants are forced to take a panic test, and once again they fail it and turn around and flee. And this time they flee off the table for good. They will be one of the few survivors to make it home and tell the tale. So that will leave the Bretonnians with only 1 remaining unit on the battlefield, and that's the 3 Grail Knights. And it happens to be their turn next. The Tomb Kings are done with their last turn, and now we'll go to the Bretonnians' last turn. And the Bretonnians have one final move that they can make, the final glorious charge into the skeletal spearmen. Maybe if they kill enough skeletons, they can get half the points from that unit and salvage what is left of this game. All final hope is placed in these heroes. And so they roll for the charge, and they get it. They get in and make the charge, crashing into those skeletal spearmen. They pass their fear check. They pierce with their lances, but they are ultimately only able to get 2 final wounds on those spearmen. Not terrible, but also not great. And then the horses, the war horses, do not get any wounds either. So they only get 2 total wounds upon those skeletal spearmen. And then the spearmen get to strike back, and they ultimately land 1 wound on those knights. And that 1 wound will be allocated to the regular Grail Knight musician, keeping that wound off of the general. So when we go to tally the combat resolution, the Bretonnians win the combat by 1 point. 4 points to 3. And that causes the skeletons to crumble due to instability by 1 more wound, bringing them down to 10 skeletons remaining. And that will be exactly 50% of their starting unit size. Just 1 wound shy of scoring the decimated victory point value on that unit. Just ever so close, but no cigar. So that is officially the last action of this game, and it is done. Very tempting to continue and fight this one to the death, but out of respect for the tournament, we decided to halt it right here. It's anyone's guess what would have happened from this point on. Final scoring. The Bretonnians earn full points for eliminating 2 full units, the skeletal horsemen and the warriors with hand weapons. They also earn the bonuses for capturing their unit standards, and the Bretonnians also eliminate both characters and earn the bonus for killing the army general. All of this reaching a total of 647 points. The Tomb Kings eliminate all the Bretonnian units except for the Grail Knights, and they earn the bonuses for capturing 3 unit standards. They killed 18 out of 21 knights. They only put 2 wounds on the paladins and scored no points off of them. The Tomb Kings total comes to 765 points. And the Tomb Kings will take the victory. They win by a margin of 118 points. Go Bonies! The Tomb Kings will be the first team in the league to score a W. The next game in this series will be the Dwarfs taking on the Daemons, so look for that coming up on this channel. And now I'd like to announce the Bonepile Miniatures MVP of the game. And the award will go to the Tomb Kings Chariots, the Crazy Train. The Chariots took out a lot of Bretonians with their successful charges. They completely wiped out the Knights of the Realm and the Men-at-Arms, and also put some hurt on the questing knights. They literally completed a circle around the battlefield. They took some damage, but they ended the game with 2/3 of their wounds remaining. And here's some vital stats on the Tomb Kings army. Charge results. Magic. Shooting. And close combat. And the stats for Bretonnia. First the charges. Shooting. And close combat. How much different would this game have been if the Knights of the Realm hadn't failed their charge? But this concludes our battle report. Thanks for watching. Please leave us any questions, comments, or suggestions. You may check out our YouTube channel and our hobby blog at bonepileminiatures.com for more information on our club rules, army showcases and discussions, army background stories, and more battle reports. Please hit subscribe and select all notifications on the bell if you wish to be notified when our next battle report drops. See you next time.